My name is Lucas Carter, a 28-year-old graphic designer living in New York. My work primarily revolves around branding projects and website design for clients. I spend most of my time in my studio or in front of a computer screen, a predictable and somewhat monotonous life. I never paid much attention to romance. Until one rainy October night. The night that changed everything. That evening, I was rushing home after a long day at work. The rain was pouring down, the droplets hitting my windshield like thousands of tiny needles. I knew I was driving faster than the speed limit allowed, but with the empty road ahead of me and exhaustion weighing on my body, I just wanted to get home as soon as possible. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights appeared in my rearview mirror, making my heart drop. "Damn it," I muttered under my breath, slowly easing off the gas and pulling over to the side of the road. I had never been pulled over before, but I knew this time there was no getting out of it. A bright beam of a flashlight cut through the rain, shining through my driver's side window. A firm knock followed. Swallowing hard, I rolled down the window and found myself face to face with a tall, broad-shouldered man in a police uniform. He looked to be in his early 30s, with short, neatly trimmed brown hair and sharp, chiseled features. His piercing blue eyes studied me with a professional but intense gaze. "License and registration, please," he said, his deep voice firm yet controlled. With slightly unsteady hands, I handed over my documents, feeling like a schoolboy caught breaking the rules. As he took my license, my eyes flicked to the name tag on his uniform, Ryan Dawson. 2 days after my unexpected run-in with the striking patrol officer, I still couldn't get him out of my head. Ryan Dawson, that name lingered in my mind, along with his commanding presence and those sharp, assessing blue eyes. I wasn't sure if it was the nerves from getting pulled over, or something else entirely that I wasn't ready to admit yet. On Saturday evening, I stopped by my favorite cafe, Brew and Bean, the place I often worked from when I needed a change of scenery. The rain had stopped, but the air remained damp and chilly, making the warm cafe feel even cozier than usual. I was deep in focus, working on a new website design on my laptop, when a familiar deep voice spoke beside me. "Hope you don't drink your coffee as fast as you drive." I startled slightly and looked up, only to lock eyes with Ryan Dawson. This time, he wasn't in uniform. Instead, he wore a fitted gray Henley and dark jeans, the soft fabric clinging to his broad frame in a way that only emphasized his athletic build. I swallowed hard, a faint jolt of electricity running through me. "Officer Dawson?" I arched an eyebrow, trying to keep my voice steady. Ryan chuckled softly and shook his head. "Tonight, I'm just Ryan. No badge, no flashing lights, no speeding tickets." He lifted his coffee cup slightly. "Mind if I join you?" I hesitated for a brief second before nodding. "Sure." Ryan pulled out the chair across from me, his eyes briefly flicking to my laptop screen. "I looked you up after checking your license." My heart pounded against my ribs. "You looked me up?" "I did," he admitted openly, without the slightest hint of hesitation. "I found your design website. Your work is really impressive." A wave of heat spread across my face. A patrol officer had no reason to look up a speeding violator, unless... I cleared my throat. "I don't think that's standard protocol for handling traffic violations." Ryan laughed, a deep, warm sound that made something tighten in my stomach. "Not exactly, but you're an exception." The air between us grew thick with an unspoken tension. I could feel his gaze on me, sharp, yet somehow warm at the same time. For a moment, I wondered if I was imagining things, or if there was something real happening between us. Our conversation flowed surprisingly easily after that. Ryan told me he'd been a cop for 8 years, that he had a passion for photography, and that he had a Labrador named Charlie. I shared stories about my work, the sleepless nights, the endless deadlines, and even showed him a few designs I was working on. Time slipped away. When I finally glanced at the clock, it was nearly midnight. Ryan looked at me, hesitating, before finally speaking. "I know this might be unexpected, but would you want to grab dinner with me sometime?" My heart skipped a beat. A cop just asked me to dinner. A man just asked me to dinner. I met his gaze, trying to read the thoughts behind those piercing blue eyes. Maybe it was just dinner between two people. Or maybe, I wasn't imagining this at all. I smiled, trying to play it cool despite the fact that my palms had suddenly turned clammy. "I think I can make time for that." Ryan smiled back, a real smile. Not the serious, unreadable look he had when I first met him in uniform. And that smile made me feel seen. As Ryan walked out of the cafe, I found myself watching him until the door swung shut behind him. I had never felt this confused in my life. I pressed a hand against my chest, feeling the erratic beat of my heart. I didn't know what this was. But one thing was clear. Ryan Dawson was not just the cop who let me off with a warning. 3 days later, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of my shirt for the third time. Why was I so nervous? This was just dinner, right? My phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. Ryan, I'm outside your building. Didn't want to ring the doorbell and disturb your neighbors. I took a deep breath, ran a quick hand through my hair, and opened the door. Ryan stood there, wearing a navy blue button-down and dark jeans, looking both confident and slightly hesitant at the same time. Hey, he said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I nodded, trying not to let my nerves show. Hey, ready to go? The restaurant Ryan had chosen was a cozy little Italian place tucked into a quiet street corner. The glow of candlelight reflecting off rustic wooden tables. From the moment we sat down, I could sense that something between us had shifted. This wasn't like our casual chat at the cafe anymore. There was something heavier in the air now, a sweet kind of tension. An unspoken anticipation. Throughout dinner, conversation flowed effortlessly, as if we'd known each other forever. I told him about my latest design projects and the endless pressure of deadlines. He shared stories of his long night shifts, the unpredictable nature of his job, and some of the dangerous situations he'd faced. Then, as we shared a slice of tiramisu, Ryan suddenly set his spoon down and looked at me intently. I've never done this before, he said, his voice quieter now, a little uncertain. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? Ryan inhaled deeply, as if summoning the courage to say what came next. I've never dated a man before. His words hung between us, light as air but heavy enough to make my heart pound faster. I reached across the table, my touch deliberate but gentle. Ryan, then why are you here? He gave me a small, almost nervous smile. Something so raw and honest that it made my chest ache. Because I can't stop thinking about you. My pulse skipped a beat. I gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, feeling his fingers tremble slightly beneath mine. We can take this as slow as you need. Ryan glanced down at our intertwined hands, then squeezed back, a silent promise lingering between us. Thank you, Lucas. After dinner, we took a slow walk along the river, the crisp autumn air sending a chill through my body. Ryan noticed instantly. Without a word, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders, his warmth lingering in the fabric. I smirked playfully. Thanks, Officer Dawson. He chuckled softly, but then his expression shifted, his gaze turning hesitant, almost conflicted. Lucas, he murmured. I looked up, meeting those piercing blue eyes, the streetlights casting soft reflections in them. Yeah? Ryan licked his lips, as if waging a battle within himself. I really want to kiss you right now. My heart stopped for a beat. I didn't hesitate. Then why don't you? He swallowed, then slowly leaned in, his hand gently brushing against my cheek. And then, his lips met mine. Our first kiss wasn't rushed. It was soft, almost hesitant, but undeniably full of longing. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer, and I could feel his heartbeat pounding as wildly as mine. When we finally pulled away, both of us were breathless. Ryan rested his forehead against mine, his voice a whisper. Damn, I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you. I let out a quiet laugh, still in disbelief that this was really happening. Then maybe you should have written that ticket a little faster. Ryan chuckled, then pulled me into a tight embrace. In that moment, I knew, this wasn't just a fleeting attraction. We had just stepped into something far greater. My relationship with Ryan developed naturally, as if it had always been waiting to unfold. We found comfort in quick coffee breaks between his shifts, late nights cooking together in my tiny apartment, and Sunday mornings at the park with Charlie, his loyal Labrador. But despite all these moments of happiness, a wall remained between us, one that Ryan wasn't ready to break down. We never held hands in public, never shared a casual touch when others might see. Outside, Ryan kept his distance, a deliberate caution that didn't go unnoticed. I understood. He was a police officer. working in an environment that wasn't always welcoming to people like us. But understanding it didn't make it hurt any less. One evening, I was cooking dinner when Ryan walked into my apartment, looking more exhausted than usual. He set his bag down and, without a word, stepped behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and burying his face in my neck, as if searching for refuge. "How was your day?" I asked, stirring the pasta sauce. He let out a long breath, his voice heavy with frustration. "Terrible. Thompson, my partner, spent the whole shift making jokes about another officer people suspect is gay. Just the usual locker room crap, and I just sat there. I didn't say anything. I set the spoon down and turned in his arms to face him. Ryan?" He shook his head, the guilt in his blue eyes unmistakable. "I'm a coward, Lucas. I enforce the law, but I can't even stand up for myself." I cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my gaze. "You are not a coward. You're just not ready yet. And no one gets to decide when that moment comes, except you." Ryan stared at me for a long moment before suddenly pulling me in, kissing me fiercely. There was no hesitation this time, only desperation, frustration, and a need so deep it sent a shiver down my spine. His hands gripped my waist tightly, as if afraid I would slip away if he didn't hold on. Dinner was forgotten. A week later, we were walking Charlie through the park when Ryan suddenly spoke. "I want you to come to my sister's wedding." I stopped mid-step. "You mean, as a friend? Or?" Ryan glanced at me, his expression serious. "Sarah already knows about us. She supports me. And I think it's time you met my family." My heart raced. This was a big step. If Ryan was willing to introduce me to his family, then maybe, just maybe, he was finally ready to stop hiding. I squeezed his hand gently. "I'd be honored." Ryan smiled softly, nervous, but filled with quiet determination. But neither of us knew that this wedding would be the biggest test Ryan had ever faced. 3 weeks later, Ryan and I drove into a quiet suburban neighborhood, where his family was preparing for Sarah's wedding. I watched as his grip on the steering wheel tightened the closer we got to the venue, a beautiful garden strung with twinkling lights in the evening glow. "You okay?" Ryan exhaled slowly. "I've never brought anyone, I've never brought a guy home before." I reached over and placed my hand over his, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I'm not going anywhere. We've got this." "Ryan." As soon as we stepped in, Sarah, a tall woman with the same brown hair as Ryan, pulled me into a tight hug. So my big brother finally had the guts to bring someone home. My face flushed slightly, but before I could respond, Ryan cleared his throat pointedly. "Sarah, cut it out." She arched a brow. "Come on, Ryan. I've known for years. Mom might be a little slow to catch on. But me? Not so much." We all laughed, but I could tell Ryan still wasn't completely at ease. When he introduced me to his parents, he simply said, "This is Lucas. He's a friend." I saw Sarah's slight frown of disappointment, but she didn't say anything. Ryan's mom, on the other hand, was incredibly kind. She welcomed me warmly, asking a few polite questions but nothing too intrusive. Yet at one point, I caught her watching us with a soft, knowing expression, as if she had already pieced things together. Everything was going smoothly, until a voice suddenly called out from behind us. "Dawson? Didn't expect to see you here." We turned around and came face to face with Mike Miller, one of Ryan's fellow officers. Ryan stiffened instantly, his fingers flexing at his sides. I could feel the tension in the air. Miller walked up, his gaze flicking toward me. "Who's this?" For a split second, I saw a flicker of panic in Ryan's eyes, but it was gone just as quickly. Then, he took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and spoke with unwavering clarity. "This is Lucas. We're dating." I nearly stopped breathing. For the first time ever, Ryan said it out loud, without hesitation. Mike raised an eyebrow, then suddenly burst into laughter. "Well, guess I just won my bet with Thompson." Ryan frowned. "Bet? What bet?" Mike shrugged casually. "Half the precinct has suspected it for years. We were just waiting to see when you'd admit it yourself." My mouth fell open in shock, while Ryan looked like he'd just been smacked in the face. "You mean?" Ryan stammered. Mike clapped him on the shoulder. "Dawson, you're a damn good cop. Nobody gives a crap who you date, as long as you can still take down the bad guys." Ryan looked at me, then back at Mike, and I saw the tension in his face slowly fade away. He exhaled sharply, nodding. I don't know if I should feel relieved or offended that you guys were betting on my personal life. He muttered. Mike chuckled. Welcome to real life, buddy. Ryan turned to me, and for the first time that evening, he truly smiled, not a nervous, uncertain smile, but one of genuine ease and confidence. After Mike walked away, I gently pulled Ryan aside to a quieter corner. You just did something huge, I whispered. Ryan looked down, his face caught between pride and fear. I don't even know why I said it. I just saw you standing there, and I didn't want to hide anymore. I placed my hand over his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. I'm so proud of you. He squeezed my hand lightly, and in that moment, I knew Ryan Dawson was finally stepping into the light. But I had no idea the real test was yet to come. Everything between Ryan and me was going better than ever. He had stopped hiding our relationship from his close friends and family. He hadn't completely come out at work, but at least he was no longer running from the truth. I thought things were finally settling into place. I was wrong. One fateful night, everything changed. I was working late at my studio when my phone rang. Seeing Ryan's name on the screen, I smiled and picked up. But the voice on the other end was not the Ryan I knew. It was weak, uneven, filled with pain. Lucas, I'm at Boston General Hospital. I shot up from my chair, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. What happened? Are you okay? Got attacked during a traffic stop. His voice wavered slightly. Just a shoulder wound, nothing serious. Don't worry. Don't worry? How the hell was I not supposed to worry when the man I loved was in the hospital after an attack? I didn't ask any more questions. I just grabbed my keys and ran. When I got to the hospital, Ryan was lying on the bed, his left shoulder wrapped in bandages, bruises forming along his ribs. He tried to play it off as nothing, but I could see the pain hidden behind his eyes. I rushed to his side, ignoring everyone else in the room. What the hell happened? Ryan sighed, his jaw tightening. Routine traffic stop, until the guy recognized me. I frowned. Recognized you? What do you mean? Ryan swallowed hard. He saw us at the bar last week. My whole body went rigid. At first, he just started yelling slurs. Calling me. Ryan cut himself off, shaking his head as if he didn't want to repeat the words. I tried to defuse the situation, but then he pulled a knife. If Thompson hadn't been there in time, I might not just be dealing with a shoulder wound. A mix of rage and fear surged through me. Ryan, you shouldn't have. Shouldn't have what? His sharp gaze met mine, no longer filled with pain but burning with resolve. Shouldn't have come out? Shouldn't have stopped hiding? I had no words. Ryan exhaled, reaching for my hand. I know you're scared, Lucas, but if I have to live in fear just because I love you, then I'd rather take the hit. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I gripped his hand tightly, holding on to him as if he was the only solid thing left in my world. You're not losing me, Ryan. Good, he whispered, squeezing back, because I don't ever want to let you go. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I hated that he was hurt. I hated that loving me had put him in danger. But more than anything, I had never been prouder of him. I squeezed his hand tightly. You're not allowed to leave me. You hear me? Ryan gave me a weak smile, his eyes full of warmth. I'm not going anywhere. After the attack, Ryan's life changed faster than either of us could have imagined. News of the incident spread, not just within the police force but across local media. Headlines flashed across TV screens and newspapers. Police officer attacked for his sexuality. Ryan never wanted to be in the spotlight, but suddenly, he was at the center of a public conversation about LGBTQ+ rights in law enforcement. At first, he refused to speak to the media. He just wanted to do his job. But one day, the police commissioner called him into his office. Would you be willing to speak at our department's diversity and inclusion training? Ryan sat in silence for a long time. I could see it in his eyes, the fear, the hesitation, but also something stronger. And then, he said yes. Ryan's story spread quickly, making waves in the city. At first, he was met with mixed reactions. Some people were supportive, while others were vocal in their disapproval. Old prejudices surfaced, but so did unexpected allies. What surprised him most was the overwhelming support from his colleagues. Even the police commissioner personally asked him to speak at an upcoming public event on equality and law enforcement. At first, Ryan refused. I'm not the kind of guy who likes standing in front of a crowd. But I took his hand. My gaze steady. Ryan, this isn't just about you. It's about all the people out there who are still afraid, just like you were. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're right. On the day of the event, I sat in the front row, my heart pounding as Ryan stepped up to the podium. He looked strong, steady, and completely free. For years, he began, his deep voice carrying through the room. I thought that being true to myself would cost me the respect of my peers. That I had to hide who I was to be taken seriously as an officer. Then, his gaze softened as he found me in the crowd. But then I met someone who showed me the truth, that honesty doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger. My chest tightened with emotion. When his speech ended, the room erupted into applause. Ryan wasn't just a good cop anymore, he was an inspiration. That night, as we walked home, Ryan was unusually quiet. I nudged him gently. What's on your mind? He smiled, though there was a hint of nerves in his expression. When I was lying in that hospital bed, I realized something. I frowned slightly. What? Ryan reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box, and flipped it open. My heart stopped. Inside was a simple, silver ring, not extravagant, but full of meaning. Lucas Carter, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You changed my life. You gave me the courage to be myself. And I can't imagine a future without you in it. Will you marry me? The world blurred around me. All I could see was him. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded, over and over again. Yes, yes, absolutely, yes. Ryan's grin was the brightest I'd ever seen. And as he slid the ring onto my finger, he pulled me into a deep, soul-searing kiss. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise. We were married in Central Park in the spring, beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms and surrounded by our closest family and friends. Sarah, who had been waiting for this moment for years, helped plan the entire event. Ryan's fellow officers, including Thompson and Miller, attended in full uniform, even forming an honor guard as we walked down the aisle. And Ryan's mother, who had once struggled to understand, hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for helping Ryan find himself." I smiled, squeezing the hand of the man I loved. He found himself, I said softly. I just got lucky enough to be part of the journey. 6 months later, Ryan was promoted to sergeant and placed in charge of his precinct's LGBTQ+ outreach program. I expanded my design business, working with more nonprofits and advocacy groups than ever before. One night, while driving past the exact spot where Ryan first pulled me over, he suddenly flipped on his patrol lights for a moment. I laughed, trying to recreate our first meeting. He shot me a sideways glance, warmth filling his eyes. I like how we ended up better. I reached over, lacing my fingers through his. My heart full. Me too. And as we drove home together, I realized something. Sometimes, love finds you in the most unexpected places. And sometimes, breaking the speed limit leads you exactly where you were meant to be.